Hello, I'm Chana Spraker, Director of the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. In celebration of W.W. Law's 100th birthday, I'm really excited to share the W.W. Law collection with you through a brief presentation of its highlights. To start off with, I thought trying to consolidate the wealth of resources in the law collection into a short presentation would be easy, but it proved very challenging for me. The W.W. Law collection is actually a series of collections under that large umbrella. It is both diverse and complex, much like the man who amassed this community treasure. When the city received the collection, it was over 2,000 plus cubic feet of unprocessed material in a number of different formats and stages of organization and deterioration. We've been working on this collection for about 8 years, much longer than I initially expected, but I'm proud of what is now open and available to the public for research. I'd like to remind everyone that he was born on Emancipation Day, 60 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. His sister Dorothy was born exactly 1 year after him, also on Emancipation Day. This entry into the world foreshadowed Mr. Law's lifelong fight for equality, justice, and freedom for all. The loss of his father at just age 10 was a pivotal moment in his life, and he often talked about the importance and influence of both his mother Geneva and his grandmother Lily Bell Wallace. His scoutmaster, John S. Delaware, and Reverend Ralph Mark Gilbert served as strong mentors and in many ways surrogate fathers. As I highlight the different collections that make up the overall law collection, I've provided some basic information on the left, including the collection name, date range, and size of the collection, as well as some collection details and highlights. The W.W. Law personal papers cover Law's interests, accomplishments, and responsibilities primarily through correspondence. Here you will find documentation of lifelong relationships, like this Christmas card from Virginia Kaya, which includes an original photograph of the Kaya Museum in Cuyler Brownville. The collection also documents his involvement in community groups like the Boy Scouts and YMCA. When we talk about W.W. Law, we first think of him as a civil rights leader at the height of that career in the 1960s. But leadership and service is found throughout his life, starting when he was a youth involved with the Boy Scouts. Military service during World War II strengthened his leadership skills, and commitment to service is reflected in his lifelong attachment and contributions to many organizations. Mr. Law joined the NAACP Youth Council in 1942 at the age of 19, and his NAACP career included serving as Youth Council President, National Chairman for the Annual Youth Conference, President of the Savannah Branch for 26 years, 30 years on the National Board of Directors, and as President of the Georgia State Conference of Branches. The NAACP Savannah Branch Records Collection documents all of this, as well as how the local branch interacted with the state, regional, and national levels. Correspondence tracks the fight for equal rights in Savannah, including this letter on the left in 1961 to Mr. Law from James R. Alexander, seeking advice on mounting weigh-ins at Tybee, as well as the letter on the right from 1963 between NAACP legal leadership discussing how to integrate the Daffin Park pool. After stepping down as president of the local NAACP branch in 1976, Law turned his full attention to preserving the history, landmarks, and heritage of Savannah's African American community, thereby ensuring Savannah's complete history was represented. The SALA and related cultural organizations' records document these efforts through the establishment of the Savannah Yamacraw branch of SALA, the King Tisdale Cottage Museum, the Negro Heritage Trail, the Ralph Mark Gilbert Civil Rights Museum, and much more. This collection covers everything from the daily operation of these museums and organizations to special events and exhibits, and how the organizations and Mr. Law collaborated to accomplish their goals. I've already been showing you images from the W.W. Law photograph collection, which includes over 4,000 items that document Mr. Law's life, as well as all of the work of the Savannah NAACP branch and the cultural institutions he founded. Here you see a photograph in the upper left of Mr. Law teaching a postal exam class for the NAACP. On the right is his mother, Geneva Wallace Law, in 1922, wearing a dress and hat she made herself. And at the bottom is an image of letter carriers for the U.S. Postal Service, and Mr. Law is in the front row, second from left. The moving image and sound collection spans the work he did across all activities, including civil rights, historic preservation, and tourism. It is a complex collection to manage due to the variety of formats, some obsolete, and issues with copyright clearance for all contributors. On the lower right is an example of the catalog for this collection. This particular entry is for a program called Black History, an overview of Black Catholics in Georgia, in which Sister Julian, seen here, spoke at Beth Eden Baptist Church during a meeting of the Savannah-Yamercar branch of ASALH. The collection also includes oral histories collected by Stephen Tuck for his book Beyond Atlanta. I'm going to play for you an excerpt from Geneva Wallace Law's 1991 interview, during which she talks about threats against Mr. Law.
Picket lines and mass meetings, and I just attended every one of them. And we had people that would call me and tell me to get places to bury him. They was going to kill him. They burned crosses around the house. They called people, stopped people on the road and asked them where WW Law living. They get the phone number and would call me. He'd be out of town and tell me I better get a place to bury him because they was going to kill him. And so a lot of nights I would be up in my bed upstairs and beacon lights would shine at my window, just going by backwards and forwards. And we had a very nice preacher around on the next street, on 36th Street, but she would burn crosses around there and all, and I would call him for assistance because he would be out of town because it would frighten me so. And so then he would call and have people, policemen, to guard the house. They said it was going to kill me in there if I didn't tell where he was at. And when he would come back, I'd explain it to him, and he would tell me, don't worry. That because he had training in the army, he had never used yet, and he would use it, not me, for me not to worry about nothing. But they would still do it. Some days he'd come from work with the cross, the burnt cross, where they burned it where he worked at on his shoulder. I think we got it out there right now. And I just went through so much, baby. But I prayed and asked God to help me to go through it and take care of my child because he was all I had.
Paul received numerous accolades, awards, and honors for his work as a community servant and leader. In this image, he's receiving the 1973 Richard R. Wright Award for Excellence for, quote, unrelating efforts undertaken in the pursuit of justice for all men, and especially the poor and downtrodden. Though the plaque on the right is a little hard to read in the slide, I wanted to highlight it. In 1994, the Longshoremen's Association, Local 1414, presented Law the Outstanding Humanitarian Award for dedicated service to the uplift and preservation of the heritage of people of African descent, for more than 50 years of courageous leadership, for visionary leadership, and for creative guidance and spiritual insight. Mr. Law was a lifelong learner and scholar, with an insatiable thirst as apparent from his collections. He was eager to share his knowledge, especially with the youth. When I meet someone who knew Mr. Law well, or even just encountered him a few times, they usually tell me one of two things. Either they gave him a ride since he didn't drive, or he gave them reading materials, articles he thought were important, books from his collection. Sometimes these two events were intertwined. They gave him a ride, and then they sat in the car while he educated them. Law's love of learning is represented in his extensive collections of published material. The book collection contains over 6,000 items, of which over 1,300 are history-related titles. He has a wonderful collection of books related to music history and theory, and he amassed a large collection of children's books. His periodical collection reflects his personal interests as well, with everything from government and religion to over 1,400 items published by local Savannah organizations. The pamphlet collection is just as diverse and includes booklets, manuals, reports, and brochures. Mr. Law surrounded himself with items of importance to him, from his books to his music to his art collection. In this quote from an interview with W. W. Law, he discusses his collecting habits. I'll just read aloud the last part. I then realized that whenever I see something, whether it be a book or a record, I don't put off. So I developed a habit, never smoked, never drank liquor. I had taken my liquor money and my smoking money, and I would invest. When the city accepted the Law collection, many people told me he was a hoarder and a lot of it was trash. After carefully going through it, I can tell you that there was very little trash. What may have looked overwhelming and like chaos to those who visited his house was really just the manifestation of his addiction to culture, history, and documentation. These collections represent his own personal investment in our culture and history. The music collection is one of the biggest collections, measuring over 155 cubic feet. This collection is an excellent example of Mr. Law's diverse interests, with genres from jazz to folk to popular to stage, and recordings in Hebrew, Russian, and Italian. The Massey Heritage School has developed a Spotify playlist of about 24 songs in honor of Mr. Law's birthday. You can access it through this URL or QR code. Music was definitely his passion, listening to it, studying it, and learning to perform. He has a very interesting sheet music and songbook collection, which just like his recordings is diverse in genre and includes many songbooks of patriotic, camp, and community music. Two items of local interest are the sheet music for It's St. Patrick's Day in Savannah, performed by Eddie Daly and the United States Marine Band in 1953, and Reverend Ralph Mark Gilbert's The Living Savior. One of my favorite collections is Mr. Law's art collection, which largely came about from his work at the King Tisdale Cottage Museum. He seems to have had no preference for style or media, instead focusing on subject matter, and he collected local, regional, and national artists, many of which he formed a close personal relationship with. The drawing on the lower left is by Mr. Law himself during his time in the Army. There are several drawings by him, and I believe his love of art was well formed in his youth, but not realized until the 1970s and 1980s, when he was curating exhibits and mentoring young artists starting their careers. One of my favorite pieces is this lino-cut print by Margaret Burroughs in the upper left, titled Boy Reading. I like to think of it as Mr. Law as a child immersed in his books. We've already talked about Law's strong shift into preservation and history, but his efforts with the SALA, the King Tisdale Cottage Foundation, and working with local and state leaders on historic preservation solidified him as Savannah's community historian, and what many would call its griot. Because people recognized that he cared for and would preserve this history, they often entrusted him with important documents and collections. We have a handful of small family collections and records from local institutions. Just a few highlights include plans for the Greenbrier Children's Center during the 1940s, Mary L. Ayer's World War II scrapbook, which documents African American women's involvement on the Savannah home front, including the first African American woman inducted into the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, or WACS, in Savannah, as you see in the clipping on the upper right, and Frank Stoney's 1910 diploma from Georgia State Industrial College, what we now know as Savannah State. But we're still working to process and open this massive collection. What's coming? We have a few small collections coming online this year, including bills of sale for enslaved people from Tennessee. An example on the right documents Nelson, a man of about 20 years old, being sold for $1,800 in 1858. We have a manuscript called Trapped in Georgia, My Life, which from a cursory review looks like it will prove to be very interesting. We have yet to tackle the artifact collection, which includes things like Mr. Law's postal uniform. And we have additions to the reference files and periodicals. I feel like we may be working on the reference files for the rest of my life. We are already at over 1,300 files organized by subject, and we still have a lot more clippings that Mr. Law kept that we need to file. The files range by subject, include newspaper clippings on basically anything law thought was important. We found these files extremely useful as we are asked about people, places, and things in Savannah. Once we have the collection fully processed, we will still have ongoing archival management issues, including clearing up privacy and copyright, addressing conservation of specific items, and continuing to digitize for off-site access, as well as converting media to more stable formats. We hope to continue working with organizations and schools to continually raise awareness of this treasure trove and encourage people to use it. Mr. Law left a gift to this community in the form of his archival collections, but what this gift represents to me is a continuation of his legacy of inspiring the next generation to lead and make positive change. Through these collections, Mr. Law is continuing to teach us and share his knowledge, just as if you ran into him on the street and he sent you on your way with something to read. You can access the WW Law collection through our online tools, including the collection finding aids and inventories, and select digitized content. That website is www.savannahga.gov/law. If you would like to use the collection in person, you can schedule a research appointment to come into our research room at City Hall by emailing us at archives@savannahga.gov. So I hope you've enjoyed this brief intro to the WW Law collections, and I encourage you to make use of it and share the news of it widely.